Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Why are you sitting there? It's time. You know Michael won't be happy if you're late. Cindy stood up obediently. Sit or don't sit, it won't change anything. You have to go and do your duty. Michael was very good at getting girls into debt. And what was his sense of smell? He unmistakably determined that the girl is in some delicate or desperate situation, and immediately did so to finish the crush. Cindy came to the city like so many others for a better life. She didn't run away, but her grandmother, with whom she lived, was gone, and she had nothing to do there. The village didn't like her grandmother. She was a mean, angry old woman. She didn't like Cindy. She chased her all the time. If other girls bathed at the lake, Cindy had to weed something in the vegetable garden. She could only bathe in the evening. Usually, after all the work was done, Grandma would say, "Go to the lake, rinse yourself, or the laundry is often washed, it will spoil." Cindy obediently took a towel and went for a swim. The mosquitoes were chasing her in clouds, and she had to dive every now and then to keep them away. But she was happy. Her body seemed to calm down from the heat and from fatigue. Grandma was gone when Cindy turned 17. Cindy didn't shed a tear, and a week later, after collecting all the money she had in the house, which was not a small amount, she closed the house and went to town. True, the box with large earrings and ring, which grandmother wore on holidays to take with her, did not become. She hid them in the basement, let them lie. When she settled down, she would come back for them, let the memory be. They were made of some cheap material, like silver, but obviously something else. Her grandmother would never splurge on expensive ones. Cindy was a serious girl, and you had to thank her grandmother for that. She wasn't afraid of any work, because she knew how to do everything. She was going to the city for a reason. Cindy was going to study. She calculated everything. For the first time she will have enough, and then she will find some part-time work. She will definitely find it, but everything went completely wrong. When she arrived in the city, she was literally deafened by the sounds. Everything was so big, glowing, and terribly unfamiliar. Cindy was carrying a large bag on her shoulder, but she wasn't looking where she was going. She was looking at the town. Yeah, their town wasn't even close. What was it? As she went to the center of her town, she could walk around the whole city in an hour, and here was such splendor. "Young lady, why don't you look where you're going?" Cindy felt at the last moment that she had impaled someone with her bag. A young man stood in front of her. He had a cup in his hand, but the coffee from the cup was dripping down his shirt. "Oh, I'm sorry." Cindy wanted to apologize, but seeing the displeased look on the man's face, she went on the offensive. "You're running like a madman. You saw the bag I was carrying. It was easier for you to go around, and if you don't watch your step, that's your problem." The look on his face became such that the girl couldn't stand it and laughed. "All right, I'm sorry." The man suddenly smiled. "My name is Liam, and I'm Cindy. Where did you come from, Cindy?" I'm here. I'm on the train over there." "You're going to theater school, I suppose." Cindy blushed. "Why theater school? It's like there's nowhere else to study." "You're not going to theater school?" "No." Cindy would never have admitted that that was why she had come here, but after the man's words she realized that there were plenty of people like her in the city. Of course she had known about it before, but now she clearly realized how naive she was, no different from the others, the same fools. "Where are you going?" Cindy wanted to argue again that she wasn't going anywhere, but she didn't. "Looking for a room or something to rent, or something for the first time." "Well, it's complicated. Do you know what the prices are around here? I know, of course, but I'm not poor. The man looked at me doubtfully. You know what? I've got someone who can help you. Shall we? And he strode off with determination. And Cindy remained standing at a loss. Where shall we go? Why shall we go? He turned around, sighed, and walked back. Why are you standing there? Come on, don't be afraid. Liam picked up her big bag and started walking again. Cindy had no choice but to follow him. Where are we going? To my aunt's. She has a big apartment and sometimes rents out rooms. Plus, she can help with work. You need a job, don't you? Very much. I'll take any job. Liam looked at her strangely and grinned. Liam's aunt turned out to be a peculiar woman. She immediately outlined Cindy's chores, gave her a reasonable price, and simply left the room. Cindy looked at Liam confusedly. Don't worry, she's all right, but she's been in the trade for many years and is very successful, so you won't see each other much. For the first few days, Cindy hardly left the house. Accustomed by her grandmother to cleanliness, she washed everything, rubbed everything, even received praise from Vanessa. Well done. I see you like order. I'll take a little off your paycheck so you can keep cleaning. Oh, it's no trouble at all. A few days later, Liam invited her for a walk. Cindy was so excited. It's a shame. Liam had a real crush on her. She chose the best dress she could find and even put a little mascara on her eyes, which she had bought the other day at a neighbor's store. If she had mascara before, her grandmother would have made her eat it. Liam looked at her carefully. Wow, you're really pretty. Cindy blushed, and Liam suddenly thought that she had never been with anyone before him. The thought was absurd, of course, but he decided to ask. Are you blushing like you've never been complimented before? No, I haven't. My grandmother, if she saw me talking to a guy without doing anything, she'd howl. Liam felt his palms sweating. An innocent girl in this century, how could that be? He ran his finger down Cindy's cheek. Well, shall we go for a walk or to a cafe? Cindy smiled. Let's go for a walk. I haven't seen anything yet. They wandered for a long time. Liam was a real expert on the city. He seemed to know everything. The girl listened to him with her mouth open, and she realized that she had never met anyone smarter and more attractive than Liam. A week later, Liam invited her to his house. Cindy understood why, but she was sure it was the right thing to do. They would get married, and everything would be fine. She had never dreamed of such a turn. Everything was working out just as well as it could. Vanessa watched Cindy getting ready. Where are you going? I haven't seen you studying for college. You're still dating. Isn't that my Liam? Him? What's wrong with that? I don't know, girl. It's up to you to decide. But our Liam is no good, only trouble. Keep that in mind. No way. You just don't know him. He's good, really. Well, happiness is real. Vanessa laughed, and Cindy decided that as soon as she got a job, she would change the apartment. She didn't like that woman. In the evening, Liam met her and took her home at once. I'm sorry, I don't have much to offer, because my colleague's mother died. So we all contributed as much as we could, so we couldn't leave a friend in need. Cindy looked at Liam with such adoration that he even smiled. What are you doing? Liam, you are like that, and don't worry, we live in the modern world. Let's go to the store and buy something tasty. Liam shook his head. No, you don't have to. It's not nice. I'll pay you back as soon as I get my paycheck. Cindy almost shrieked with joy. He said it as if he meant that Cindy would always be there for him. Oh, who cares what we count now? They went into the store, picked up some delicacies and wine and went to Liam's. Cindy looked around with interest. A typical bachelor's apartment. Cobwebs in the corners on the ceiling, a mountain of unwashed dishes delicately covered with a towel. They settled into a room where it was obvious that Liam was trying to tidy up. After the first drink, Cindy, who never drank, became hungover when Liam held out his arms to her. She stepped towards her without a second thought. In the morning, Liam woke up and didn't find Cindy around. He thought she had left and breathed a sigh of relief. She was certainly a pretty girl, and it was her first time with him, but she was completely inexperienced. Liam liked to take pleasure, not give it. The fact that she was gone meant he wouldn't have to say all those unpleasant, "Cindy, what kind of marriage?" It's not fashionable now, and nobody needs it. It's a relic of the past, weddings, rings, holidays. Or is that all they do in your village? Well, I'm sorry. This is not a village. Liam pretended to be offended and turned away. Cindy immediately hugged him. "Oh, come on, come on. I was just saying that. I'm sorry. Are you moving?" Of course. Liam smiled contentedly. He didn't meet anyone at home. He preferred to do it on someone else's territory, so that he didn't have to clean up and take care of things. But everything was going so well here, Cindy would obey him without complaint. He already understood her character, so there would be no problems with her. Moreover, he decided to tell her that he had difficulties at work, let her get a job on her own, and run the household on her own money. Why? It will work out very well. He will rest and have fun, and at home he will have order, cleanliness, and food. And of course Cindy, who will never refuse him anything. A month later, Cindy was already working 2 jobs. She fed Liam delicious dinners, washed, ironed, and even bought him new clothes. Liam would hug her affectionately and say, "How did I live without you before? I don't understand." Cindy laughed happily. "Liam, I don't understand how I lived without you. I didn't live at all." 6 months passed, and Cindy's euphoria slowly subsided. She began to look at things more soberly and realized that everything is not so rosy in her life as it seemed before. First of all, although she worked like an ox, there was no money at all, and even the money that had been hers personally was gone. It was very strange, considering that Cindy had hardly any new things, but Liam's closet had changed almost completely. Secondly, Cindy wondered if Liam was spending too much time on a job that he wasn't paid for. And thirdly, Cindy was beginning to realize that she was a complete idiot. Does Liam have this very job at all or not? She sat down on a chair in the kitchen, looked around the room, the curtains on the windows. She bought them. The pot in which the soup was boiling, she bought them too, and the soup that was boiling in the pot was hers too. The girl got up, turned off the gas. She would not cook anything. And after all, only 6 months ago, she dreamed that she would enter the study, that she would have a normal life. Cindy suddenly thought that Vanessa had not warned her in vain. Apparently, she knew her nephew well. Cindy got ready and went for a walk. The weather was nice. She'd have to stop by work and tell her she wasn't coming back. No, of course she'd leave her alone. She had to live somehow. Liam would see that she wasn't there and that nothing had been cooked but the first meal, and she would think about it. She came home in the dark. She had rehearsed her speech all the way, but Liam was not at home. It makes sense. He'd say it was another work emergency. Cindy sighed. How frustrating was that? Well, the main thing was to talk to him. Then everything would become clear. Liam came in the morning. He took something out of the refrigerator, trying not to rattle, and sat down to eat in the dark. Cindy turned on the light. Liam looked up at her. "Hi, what are you doing up?" "Liam, we need to talk." He grimaced. It was a friend of his, to whom Liam hadn't been able to repay his debt for a long time. He had lost a little, then he wanted to win back, but he had lost even more. Once again, Liam regretted that the world technologies were developing so fast. There were no cell phones before, and there was no need to always answer the phone. No home in that, was it? A good excuse, but now try not to answer, and then you can answer and end up in the hospital. "Yeah, Michael, hi." "Hi, Liam. Is it just me, or are you avoiding me?" "Michael, of course it's me." "Then I don't understand why we don't see each other very often. I think we should meet to discuss some things." Liam sighed tiredly. "Where should I go?" "You don't need to go anywhere." "I'll come to you myself. I know the address." Michael disconnected. Liam wiped the sweat from his forehead. It wasn't funny anymore. He tried not to tell anyone his address at all, so that there would be a place no one would know about, and now Michael had found out everything. Liam looked longingly out the window. Hiding was not an option. Sooner or later he would have to go home, but the debt would be much bigger. Cindy had just come home from work when the doorbell rang. "Cindy, we have guests today, a colleague from work." The girl splashed her hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I would have cooked something delicious." "It's fine as it is." Michael was alone, but Liam had no doubt that there were some tough guys waiting for him somewhere in the entryway. "It's cozy at your place." Michael looked at Cindy. "Liam, didn't you say you had such a beautiful wife?" Liam gritted his teeth. "It's not a wife, it's Cindy." The girl snorted resentfully and went into the kitchen. When Michael and Liam were seated at the table, she said, "Well, you two are talking, and I'm going to bed. I have to work early tomorrow." She slipped out of the door, terribly anxious to hear what they would talk about, but Liam was tense. Apparently it was his boss. Let them be there and Cindy sleep. Michael ate quietly. "And you're Cindy. She's a very decent cook, I know." Liam mumbled, not lifting his eyes from his plate. "And she works, and she must be from a decent family." "She's got no one and comes from the middle of nowhere. Did you come to talk about Cindy?" Michael looked at him thoughtfully. "If you don't want to talk about Cindy, let's talk about you. I'm listening to you." "Me? Sure. I don't owe you money. You owe me money." "Michael, I'll give it to you as soon as I get it." Michael pushed the plate away. "You realize this is kindergarten. Maybe you'll have them in 10 years, when they won't be worth anything?" Liam was silent. "Liam, this girl, do you love her? Are you going to get married?" Liam couldn't help smiling. "To Cindy? What, am I sick? Why don't we want her, you country bumpkin? She cooks, cleans, buys groceries. That's all she's good for." "I wonder." Michael was tapping his fingers on the table. "Listen, Liam, you can not only pay me back, but also earn money." Liam looked at Michael in surprise. "How?" "Well, if you don't feel sorry for Cindy, are you saying that she has no family?" "No." "Michael, I don't feel sorry for her. You can have her." "What do you want me to do?" They talked for a long time. Michael left after 2 o'clock. That night, Liam was very tender and gentle with Cindy. She even changed her mind about the scandal because she could see how much Liam loved her, but she still had to talk. In the evening, when she came home from work, to her surprise, she found Liam at home. He was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "Liam, is something wrong?" He looked at her sadly and turned away to the wall. Cindy was frightened. She sat down next to him. "Liam, what's wrong? Tell me, come on." He sat down on the couch. "Yes, I guess we need to talk. I've been keeping it from you, but things are getting out of hand. You see, I've been out of work for 4 months now, ever since I was diagnosed. I thought treatment wouldn't take up much of my time, much less money. Lime saw the horror-filled eyes of Cindy and continued even more tragically. At the moment there is movement towards recovery, but there is no money, and there are huge debts that people are starting to claim. He talked for a long time. Cindy only realized that money was needed, lots of money, or her loved one would die. It was only now that it all came to her. She realized how skillfully she had been swindled, having driven her colleague into debt, and not just driven, but under receipts. Though if she hadn't had them, she couldn't refuse, she would have been forced to. Cindy went out to get the girls. Michael was already waiting for them. "All right, my chicks, ready to work?" One of the girls laughed. Cindy looked at him gloomily. Michael pinched her quite contentedly. "Why are you looking at me like a beast? It's not like I'm forcing you. Just pay your debt and walk free." Kathy is working with pleasure. She has found her vocation. Cindy looked at him angrily. "Go to hell. You'll choke someday." Michael snorted angrily. "I'd like to give you a punch that you'd remember for the rest of your life, but I can't. There's a very important man waiting for you, and your client is paying you very well, so I can leave you soon." "Well, we'll see." Cindy got into the car. She knew who Michael was talking about. She had been taken to the same client lately. It was an elderly man in a wheelchair. Cindy loved going to see him. They didn't sleep, even though that's why she was taken away for debt. They would talk, watch comedies, eat, and Cindy would just sleep it off. Charles had a son who lived abroad and couldn't come back now because he was under contract. Charles was not a poor man himself, and his son sent him good money all the time so that an old man like Charles could afford it. Cindy had started going to him a month ago. She didn't know how much the clients paid. She only got a little if they gave her something. Each of them was usually escorted to the door by a bald guy named Ethan who took the money. Then in the morning, or when he had time, he would collect the girls. Charles met her in the hallway. "Cindy, I was afraid I hadn't made it. I can't get your boss on the phone. They've invented a newfangled connection, but they can't think of one that works well." Cindy smiled. Charles was always cursing everything modern, saying it was better before. And now there's no privacy at all. Think about it, Cindy. It used to be that a man went on vacation, went to the country, and that was it. Everyone knew that he would return on such and such a date, and no one touched anyone. But now at any moment at work will be called, and if somewhere the phone sat down, then in an hour everyone is on the ears, not a life, but a glass showcase. In some ways she agreed with him, but she liked to argue. Sometimes they spent the whole evening arguing. They met by chance. Cindy went out during the day, once a month. When there were women's days, girls were given days off. Some went out. Some visited relatives. It was on one of those days that she met Charles. Cindy liked to think about anything extraneous and just walk. When she went somewhere far away, she would start a game, trying to get back to the center without questioning the passersby. That day she wandered for a long time, wandered into some cottage community, and realized she was completely lost. There were no passersby, so Cindy sighed and pulled out her cell phone, only the phone was a nuisance. It just died. Shit. Can I help you, sweet girl? Cindy turned around in amazement. In the 3 years she'd worked for Michael, no one had ever called her that. Very close behind a wrought iron fence sat a man in a wheelchair. He was dressed like he was going to a ball, black suit, white shirt, bowdy. The man intercepted her gaze, smiled. "I like, to be always in uniform. A pun, of course, but at least with clothes on. Cindy smiled. The man reminded her of some fairy tale character. Not even a fairy tale character, just an ancient one. From a time where good manners were still honored. "Hello, I'm a little lost, and my phone is dead." The man smirked. "I've always said these newfangled things are unreliable. If you had a guidebook in your purse, you wouldn't be lost. My name's Charles, by the way. My name is Cindy. Why are we talking over the fence? If you're not in a hurry, I'd love to buy you a nice cup of tea, and then Sebastian can take you." Cindy didn't hesitate. She said yes. Why should she be afraid? She had been in such trouble for 3 years that it seemed she was not afraid of anything. Sebastian turned out to be a gardener, driver, and houseworker in one person. He was only a little younger than the owner, and at first he looked at Cindy disapprovingly. Then, really nothing, even drove her to the store a few times on Charles's behalf. On one of those trips, he said, "I thought you were trying to rob my master?" Cindy was surprised, wanted to be offended, but then realized how it looked from the outside and simply replied, "Don't think so. Charles, almost the only person in this world who has treated me well, not as a thing, but as a person. I would never hurt him, never plot against him. That's a good thing. Master's been through a lot in this life. He wasn't always like this. Besides, the doctor said he had a chance to get back on his feet, except that he didn't want to." Cindy asked in surprise, "Why? I actually thought he was always like this." "No. Years ago he was driving a car with his family in it. He has a family. He did. He lost control of the car and went off the road. His wife was killed. He was left disabled. And the son was fine, except the guy got a massive shock. For 2 years he was observed by doctors, and then when he recovered, he blamed everything on his father and practically stopped communicating with him. Then when he grew up, he went abroad and doesn't even call him. Well, Charles also blames himself for everything, and that's how he punishes himself. He doesn't think that's punishment enough for him. You know, Cindy, before you showed up, he didn't even talk to anyone. He sat in his room. I even brought him food." Cindy was so upset. "Oh, how awful. He's so kind, so wonderful. How old is your son?" "He is now." Sebastian thought for a moment. 27 or 28. "And how long has he been separated?" "Since he was 20, when he left on vacation and never came back. He and his father had a big fight before he left. I heard Robert telling him everything. Charles tried to say something at first, but then he shut up. That's it. They haven't spoken since." "Well, you can't do that. Doesn't he understand?" "I guess not. You see, whether it's my father or Robert, they have the same character. Neither of them will ever make the first move." Cindy thought, "Oh, I wish I could talk to that Robert. Explain, but you can't. Charles would not forgive her for such an intrusion into his private life." The first time she told Charles, he'd looked at her for a long time. "So you're not doing your duty?" "Well, yes, but we have to do something." "What? Who needs me here with my claims?" "I've got no one. I'm not from around here." I don't think Michael didn't have it all figured out. She waved her hand. "I'm not a person at all now, and I'm not going to change anything." The man wanted to say something else, but didn't. But just 3 days later the order came in for the whole weekend. It wasn't bad money, but the girls were afraid of such orders. Cindy was afraid too, but judging by the glint in Michael's eyes, he was paid well, which meant he wouldn't be overplaying anything. She said goodbye to the girls just in case and got into the car with Ethan. He drove off, silent as always. What was her surprise when the car stopped in front of that very cottage? True, she was a little upset then. She had such a good impression of the owner of the house, and now it was crumbling like a house of cards, but Cindy was worried for nothing. They had dinner, then sat on the veranda, and she was sent to her own room to sleep. It was only then that Cindy realized that this nice older man had just decided to let her rest. The first thing after the bedroom door closed behind her, she burst into tears. It was so unusual to feel cared for. It was the first time she slept peacefully, ate, even went swimming in the pool, sometimes even forgetting what her life had become. And how much they talked about everything, life, books, movies. When Charles found out that Cindy hardly knew any movies, he was very surprised. Don't you like to watch melodramas, for example? All girls love them. I don't know, I guess I do. My grandmother didn't have a TV because you have to pay extra for electricity. Liam had no time to watch. I'd come in from my second job and just fall over. And now I don't have time for movies. Cindy, have you met Liam? I mean, it's all his fault. I tried. I waited for him at his house. He was with some girl. Anyway, he said he hated talking to people like me. From then on, Cindy had an occasional vacation. She was ashamed that Charles would give her that kind of money, but he wouldn't listen. Before Cindy and Ethan could drive away, a cab pulled up in front of the house. No one got out of it for a long time. Then the door opened and Lisa literally fell out of the car. She had been working at Michael's a little longer than Cindy had. The girl was badly beaten up and practically unsteady on her feet. Cindy rushed to her from the car. She looked at her friend with a distraught look in her eyes. House 56. Never go there. It's better from the bridge. And Lisa cried. She was led into the driveway, and Cindy got back into the car. It was quite possible that she too would someday return in the same condition, or not at all. That could happen too. In the evening, Charles asked, "Are you looking a little gloomy today?" Cindy told him everything. He listened attentively, silently, his fingers drumming on the table. "Tell you what, Cindy, give me the coordinates of your Michael. You got a personal number?" "Yes. Why do you need it?" "We need it." Cindy wrote the number on a napkin. "Now, girl, why don't you go to bed?" In the morning, Cindy woke up late. Strange, why hadn't they come for her yet? Shit, Michael's gonna yell and probably give her a ticket. She'll never pay off that debt. Charles was downstairs in his chair. "Oh, you awake, Cindy?" "Yes, I'm sorry. I've got to run." "No need. Sit down. Pour yourself a cup of coffee." Cindy stopped confused, sat down, poured coffee, and only then was surprised to see that Charles had her passport in front of him. "Oh, where did you get it? Did you kill Michael?" The man laughed. "To be honest, I really wanted to, but I had to pull myself together. I paid your debt, or rather that man's debt. I was going to ask you if you don't mind if I ask him later. Does he have that debt? Paid?" Cindy was suddenly in tears. "How could you do that?" "You're the..." "Thank you." She wiped her eyes. "And you'll have to ask him. Double or triple?" "That's good." "Cindy, I'm not insisting, but I wonder if you could stay with me for a while. You need to study, and I'll be less bored." A year passed. Cindy entered the institute, but without Charles' help, she would not have passed any exams. For 3 months, he literally kept her awake. She read, she counted, she crammed. She went to the exam like a robot, and like a robot she passed. That day they had a real party. Cindy bought a cake, Sebastian cooked meat, and Charles entertained everyone with jokes. When Sebastian went home and they were sitting around a small fire, Cindy couldn't stand it. "Tell me, did you have a family?" And Charles told everything, how he loved his wife, how he loved his son, and how he had lost both him and her. How could that be? You need to try and talk to him now. He's an adult now, an adult. No, Cindy, that's just it. He's grown up, he's a real man, but he hasn't changed his mind, and he's never even tried to talk to me. The last time I tried was about 5 years ago, but my son didn't respond, so that's the way it is. I occasionally check in to see how he's doing. I know he's doing well, but for some reason he's not married yet. Cindy worked as hard as she could for her keep and lodging. She cleaned, cooked, made sure Charles took his medication on time. Sebastian breathed a sigh of relief. "Cindy, you have no idea what it meant to me to make pancakes. It was horrible. I spent 2 days researching each dish, and only then did I try to cook it." Cindy laughed. "I really like cooking, and I like everything very much." A year later, Charles fell ill. He caught a cold somewhere in the street, and then a complication developed. He flatly refused to go to the hospital. The doctor came to his house. Cindy looked at the face of the one who had given her hope for life and realized that she would not survive if something happened. Charles was hardly eating. Nothing pleased him, and then she made up her mind. She went to his study at night when the master of the house was asleep. She explored the contents of the drawers for a long time and finally found a notebook that contained his son's address. Not only the address, but also his phone number. It took her another day to work up the courage, and then she dialed the number. The phone was not answered for a long time. Finally, a man's voice answered. "Hello. Hello, you don't know me. My name is Cindy. I live with your father." "Is that a mistress?" "But I'm not interested. What do you want?" Cindy thought he didn't hang up right away. That was good. That's what she was afraid of. "Listen, don't hang up. I'll tell you everything. It's up to you to figure out what to do. Your father, he's in a lot of pain. He tries not to show it, but I've seen him sitting in his office several times, holding your picture and crying. Did he put you up to calling me?" Cindy was scared. "No, he doesn't know. He won't forgive me for meddling where I shouldn't. I wouldn't interfere. It's just that Charles is very ill at the moment. It may not be critical, but he's lost interest in life. I'm begging you. If you would come, he might feel better." The other end of the phone laughed. "Are you afraid of losing your daddy? Do you really expect me to believe you're all that sincere?" Cindy was sick of listening to this narcissistic asshole. You know what? A man who has blackness in his soul and sees it all around him. I have nothing more to say to you. You found the culprit for your mother's death, or rather, it's very convenient for you to blame it on your father, and you live your life in peace. And your father starts the morning thinking, "I wish I hadn't survived that accident. You're a cruel man, and I'm sorry I called you." Cindy disconnected and even threw the phone. I mean, really, why would she do that? She didn't want Charles to find out. The next day, Charles got worse. There was no change in his medical condition, but his mood. The doctor took Cindy aside as he left. "Cindy, Charles needs positive emotions as much as possible. You know, moping is very dangerous in his condition." "I understand. I'll try my best." "Yes, you will. Have a good day." The doctor left, and Cindy went to her room. But just as she reached it, the doorbell rang again. She took a quick step back. The doctor must have forgotten something, opened the door, and froze. There was a man standing in front of her. He was something elusive, similar to Charles, but looked much more powerful. "Is that you?" He looked at her mockingly. It's me, and this is you. Come in, please." She backed away, and he stepped inside, tossing a large travel bag carelessly to the floor. "Sebastian, where?" "There's stuff in the car, presents." Sebastian appeared out of the ground, looked at the man for a moment, then rushed to him. "Kid, Uncle Sebastian." They hugged. Sebastian sort of even wiped his eyes. Come, make your father happy." Robert looked at Cindy confusedly. "How? Can you do that without warning? Is it all right?" She smiled. "Let's go quickly. What warning?" She opened the door to Charles' room. "Charles, you have visitors." The man reluctantly turned his head and froze. He looked silently at Robert, who was walking slowly towards him. "Son." "Robert." Cindy tactfully closed the door and went into the kitchen. She had to prepare something tasty, something festive. She had the salad ready. She put the meat in the oven, sat down, and Robert came into the kitchen. "Something smells delicious." She smiled. "Dinner will be ready in 200. Why don't you make some tea and sandwiches in the meantime?" "That would be great. I'm starving." Cindy began to make sandwiches quickly, and Robert watched her when the girl put a plate and a mug in front of him, said, "Well, tell me, Cindy, what are you doing in my father's house? That you're here out of the goodness of your heart, I don't need to tell you. I haven't believed in human souls for a long time." Cindy shrugged her shoulders. "That's your right. Everyone believes what they want to believe. But will you tell me you're not trying to marry my father?" "Marry Charles? Are you out of your mind?" Cindy immediately recognized that Robert was very handsome, probably spoiled by women's attention, and no wonder, but the way he behaved, the things he said, just repulsed her. He was so nasty. Why, a lot of girls your age only dream of such a husband. He's got money, but well, you know. Cindy, leaning over to him, was just bursting with anger. "No, I don't understand. I don't understand the intricate plans and actions that are brewing in your sick brain. And please remember, I'm here because I'm very grateful to your father. He has helped me a lot in my life. You're a completely unreliable person, so I'll be with Charles until he kicks me out. Is that clear?" Robert looked at her in a kind of admiration. "It's clear. You just don't get to swinging your fists, or your eyes will be so glittering that you'll be impossible to handle." Cindy straightened up and walked out of the kitchen shaking. What a narcissist. What kind of a narcissist who thinks he knows everything? How could Charles, the smartest and kindest man in the world, have such a son? She looked into the room. Charles was asleep. On his lips was a smile. She smiled too and quietly closed the door. In the evening, Charles even sat at the table for a while, ate a little, which Cindy was terribly pleased about. The conversation was mostly between Robert and her father. So Cindy cleared the table, said good night to everyone, and went to bed. She had to go to the institute in the morning. She left when everyone was still asleep. The day flew by unnoticed. If earlier Cindy had been worried that Charles might need her help, now she was calm. She said goodbye to her classmates and headed toward home. "Oh, what people, Cindy?" She jerked and turned around. Lion was standing in front of her. Dan, that was someone she never wanted to see in her life. To be honest, she didn't think she ever would. The city was huge, just huge. You could live here all your life and never meet him. She turned away and wanted to leave, but Liam grabbed her arm. "Where are you going, chick? You owe me something." Cindy tried to pull her hand away. "I don't. You owe me something." "Let go." "But how can I let you go? It's not fair. You have a good life and I have a bad one. Who picked you up? Who made you a town? You're a shitty village." Cindy yanked her arm away and Liam let go of her, and she fell. She hit her elbow so hard that tears came out of her eyes. And at the same moment, someone picked her up and put her on her feet, and then she saw Liam's shoes fly up. Or rather, it was he who flew down, and the feet in his boots flew up. And then she saw Robert's face in front of her. "Are you okay?" "I am." "Why are you here?" "Oh, well, thanks a lot. Let's get in the car." Cindy let him drive her to the car, and when he closed the door behind her, she cried, "Oh, God, what is it?" Why couldn't she live in peace? Why does she want so much to forget the past? She did everything to never remember it. And then Liam. Now he knows where she goes to school. Cindy suddenly squeezed her eyes shut. What if he starts to scare her? What will he tell those she socializes with at the Institute? About where she used to be, who she used to be? What to do? Robert got in the car, looked at her, held out a tissue, then sighed and touched off. When Cindy had calmed down a little, he asked, "Well, who was it?" "It doesn't matter." "Well, it doesn't matter. Then it doesn't matter." They drove home in silence. Already in front of the door, Cindy turned to him. "Please don't say anything to Charles. I don't want him to be nervous." "All right, if you say so." She knew that Robert was leaving in a week and decided that she just had to keep communication to a minimum. Charles was feeling much better. She lay awake all night, then decided that she should transfer to a correspondence school so she wouldn't need to be in the neighborhood much. And in the morning she got the news that made her clap her hands and scream like a little girl. At breakfast, Charles looked at her and said, "Cindy, you'll have to live here alone, but Sebastian will be around." "Why?" She looked at him fearfully. "What's wrong? Where are you going? Are you worse? You don't feel well?" Charles laughed. "If you'll let me say just a few words to your endless questions, I'll answer you." Cindy gave an embarrassed yelp and fell silent. "You see, Cindy, my son insists that I go with him. There's a clinic there that's willing to operate on me. And they even say the chances are good. Here, Robert's gonna stay for a couple weeks while I get checked out, and then we'll fly out together. Just for a couple months. I hope I'll be back on my own." Cindy couldn't take it anymore. She threw her arms around both Charles and Robert. For some reason, however, Robert kept her in his arms a little longer than he should have, which confused her. In the evening before going to bed, Cindy looked at herself in the mirror, eyes burning, a smile on her lips. No, not again. She can't, she mustn't. But the girl already realized that she had fallen in love with Robert irrevocably. She went out onto the balcony as she was in her light pajamas. Cindy always did. The balcony connected several bedrooms on the second floor. Charles lived on the first floor, so no one was in her way. She leaned on the railing, then turned her back to it, and found herself nose to nose with Robert. God, she'd completely forgotten he was on the second floor, too. Robert looked at Cindy with an admiring gaze. She should have run away, but she couldn't. Her feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. "Cindy." His voice was hoarse, as if he was short of breath. He moved closer, and the girl just closed her eyes, feeling his lips on hers. 2 weeks flew by like a day. Cindy thought that all these feelings and experiences that are shown in movies are all far-fetched, but no, she felt like 10 heroines put together. For the entire 2 weeks, she woke up in Robert's arms. She was insanely embarrassed in front of Charles because he knew everything about her past. How would he feel about their liaison? Robert had made far-reaching plans. He talked about the fact that in 6 months his contract would be up and he would be back. He'll come back. They'll get married right away. You'll see, it'll be great. And Daddy will dance with you at our wedding. Every time Cindy looked at Robert asleep, she promised herself that she would tell him tomorrow. but each time she put it off. She was sure that Robert would push her away in disgust, and she wanted it so badly, another day of happiness. She made it to the day of their departure, and when the bags were packed, she sat down next to Robert. "We need to talk." Robert turned to her. "Is something wrong?" Cindy didn't have time to answer. Robert's phone rang and he was speaking German, but even Cindy's knowledge of foreign languages was enough for her to realize that it was a woman calling and demanding to know when Robert would be back. Robert answered almost rudely, finally saying that he had asked her not to call. When he disconnected, Sebastian entered the room. "The carriage is here. We have to hurry. There's traffic in the city." Robert put his arm around Cindy. "I'll bring my father and we'll talk about everything, or on the phone. I promise." "I'm sorry, I gotta go." He leaned into her ear. "Love you." As they drove away, Cindy felt like the most miserable person ever. She put the calendar on the table and then crossed out today. The countdown of waiting went on. 3 weeks later, she realized something was wrong with her. Only what? The hunch came suddenly. It couldn't be. She was walking out of the clinic this morning, walking and smiling like a complete idiot. The doctor said she was pregnant. The term is very small, so when she asked who was there, he laughed and said, "A baby." Nothing else is known yet. Robert's baby is in it, his and hers. It's so unexpected, so exciting. He'll be calling tonight. Cindy had no idea what his reaction would be. She was already approaching the gate when she felt someone looking at her. Cindy turned around and immediately met eyes with Liam. She felt the blood rushing in her head. He had found her and here she was. She could definitely forget about being happy now. Liam smiled crookedly and quickly disappeared behind the bushes. Cindy walked into the house. She sat down on a chair in her clothes. She sat for a long time, then stood up resolutely and took out her suitcase. Strangely enough, she had a lot of stuff. She had to take a bag too. She thought and took half of the money that had been left for the household. Now she had to write something to Charles. He was the only one she trusted enough to talk to about everything. The letter turned out to be longer than she thought it would be. She explained everything about her and Robert, nothing about the pregnancy. She left the house, found Sebastian. "Sebastian, I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" "Yes, I'm going home." The man put away the shovel he was fixing. "Cindy, what happened?" "It's a long story, and I'd like to forget it." "Charles, I left a letter." "And Robert?" Cindy blushed. "What about Robert?" "Cindy, do you take everyone for an idiot? You can never hide what's been going on between you two." "I'll call him." "I don't know what you're thinking, but you're wrong." "Sebastian, don't you understand? I'm not worthy of Robert. He'll forget me, marry a normal girl." "It's all wrong. He won't be happy with me anyway." Cindy hugged Sebastian, then headed for the gate. "Wait, can I at least give you a ride?" She waved. "No need, thanks. I'll do it myself." Her grandmother's house greeted her with a dank dampness. It had taken her 3 days to get here. She'd changed her route on purpose so no one could find her. Her passport had been registered where she had once lived with her parents, which was almost 150 miles away. Her grandmother took her when Cindy was very young. To be honest, she can barely remember everything, and what she does remember, she doesn't want to remember. No one in the village knew what had happened to her parents. No one would ever even try to ask her grandmother because she had a short answer for everyone. Those who didn't know would blink for a long time afterward, not understanding why they were being punished. Cindy walked around the house. "Well, Cindy, there you are, back where you hated it so much. It's all right. It's going to be all right, isn't it, my good girl?" Cindy stroked her belly. She was sure she was going to have a girl, a little sunshine, with Robert's eyes. Having melted the stove, Cindy made herself some tea and sat down at the table. Tomorrow she would devote the day to cleaning, and then she had to do something about work. It was a big village, so maybe she could find something. In the morning, Cindy cleaned up, threw away a lot of things, then saw a large dried-up rod under the door. She even smiled a little. Grandma, if Cindy did something wrong, they grabbed the rod right away. And it didn't matter at all how old she was, with what pleasure she broke it and threw it into the stove. A few days later, Cindy went to the so-called office. All village business used to be settled there. Time had passed, of course, but not so much. She wondered how long she had not been here. It was 5 years. On the one hand, it was a long time, but on the other hand, what was 5 years for a person? For an ordinary person, it was just a short period of time, but for Cindy, it was a lifetime. David, Cindy hardly remembered the name of the local boss, even waved his hands. What's the job? Those who have worked all their lives have nothing to pay, and you say work. Cindy was confused. What am I supposed to do? What do you do? The same thing everyone else does. Thank God they haven't canceled the buses yet. So everyone goes downtown to work. Cindy sighed. Well, I'll drive. She had to buy a new SIN card, the one she'd thrown away at the station. She found a job quickly. The salary was small, minus the road, not much at all, but it was better than nothing. Cindy hid the money she'd taken from Charles' house. Her daughter would have to buy everything. The girl checked in at the local clinic, had all the tests. Oh, honey, I don't know what to tell you. The full-figured woman doctor, who was Cindy's doctor, was going through the papers on the table. The girl tensed up. Something wrong with the baby? No, there's nothing wrong with the baby. It's you. No hemoglobin, bad blood, and a very narrow pelvis. Not only will you have to come in more often than other women, but you'll have to go to the hospital a week before delivery. Is that serious? Well, how can I put it? For some people, these problems are not problems at all, but for others, they're dangerous. I don't want to scare you for nothing. I'll say this, we'll watch you and then we'll see. Does the child have a father? Cindy smiled. Well, what about without a daddy? Children without a daddy don't exist, but we don't have one and we won't have one. I see. And another single mom. Well, go on, and we'll have another test in a week. Cindy was very worried at first, but then she calmed down. She feels great, so she's gonna be fine. She will give birth to Christina, she will love her, and they will have a real family. Cindy didn't know why. How could she be so sure it would be a daughter? She just knew, that's all. When it was time to give birth, it was March outside. There was still a lot of snow, but the sun was already cheerful. Cindy's back had been pulling since the morning. She doesn't go into the hospital until Monday, and today is still Saturday. Strange, maybe pregnant women have a reaction to the weather like old people. She decided to go out for a walk. Maybe she'd get some air and feel better. As soon as she stepped outside, a car stopped in front of the house. She froze. Her heart was pounding so hard, she wanted to clutch it with her hand. Robert slowly stepped out of the car. He looked at her with a grim look that didn't bode well. Well, hello there, fugitive. Robert, how did you find me? He wanted to answer something, but he finally saw her stomach. What is that? Robert, did you run away from me with my baby? Yes, Robert, I ran away from you with my baby. He walked towards her. His look did not bode well. The closer he got, the more his heart pounded, the more his lower back ached. He came, close, stopped. Now you're going to have to answer all my questions. Cindy nodded and slowly began to settle down. The pain in her back intensified and began to develop throughout her body. Cindy, Cindy. She heard Robert's voice as if from far away. The girl felt that she was being carried somewhere, taken somewhere, then scolded for something. Somewhere in the distance a child's cry, so thin it must be her girl. Cindy tried to open her eyes, but she fell somewhere completely. Mommy, wake up. Mommy? Whose name is that? Cindy opened her eyes. An unfamiliar white room. Cindy tried to stroke her stomach, but it wasn't there. The remnants of sleep instantly faded away. Where? And she saw there was a nurse standing next to the bed. She had a small bundle in her arms, with only a small nose sticking out of it. Here's your princess. She's so pretty, but she's hungry too. Let me help you. Cindy took her daughter and froze. How pretty she was. She really was a princess. She wanted to feed her, but she felt someone looking at her. Robert was standing in the doorway. Cindy remembered everything. What would happen now? Cindy. Robert, I'll explain everything to you. She knew perfectly well that this time she could not explain anything to him, and perhaps she did not need to. Since Charles had not told him anything, perhaps she did not need to. Let it be her secret. Cindy looked at Robert with the eyes of a beaten dog. Tears sprang from her eyes. He rushed to her. Don't cry, you can't cry. Everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right now. Robert picked her up from the hospital. He made a mess with all the flowers and balloons. They'd never seen anything like it in the village. When they got home, Cindy saw not only the crib she'd bought from an ad, but lots of beautiful things for her daughter. In the evening, Robert took her hands in his. Cindy, when will Christina be ready for the road? Cindy was frightened. If she had a chance here, it would become quite small in the city. Oh, Robert, she's just a baby. Maybe in a few months. Months? But that's so long I have to work. A week later, Robert left and said he'd be back in 2 or 3 weeks. He couldn't come any sooner. I've got to tell my dad. You know, he's walking now, but with a cane. He is. I'm so happy for him. You have no idea. He's gonna be so happy. I didn't tell them anything. He left and Cindy felt so sad. When Christina was a month old, they went to the clinic. It was possible, of course, to wait for the doctor at home, but she was so fed up with the unloved village that she could not tell. After the checkup, when Cindy decided to walk through the market, she suddenly stopped like a stumbling block. Cindy thought she saw Liam in the crowd. She took off her seat and with a quick step, went to where the familiar face had flashed, but found no one else like him. The young woman exhaled. No, it couldn't be. Where would Liam come from? If only for her soul, but the address. And then Cindy remembered that she had once mentioned her town in conversation. If it was him, what did he want? Cindy walked through the market one more time. Christina was starting to get cranky, and the woman headed for the cab stand. Robert had left her enough money to get around comfortably. Before getting into the car, she looked around once more. No, she was definitely imagining things. Why had I come all the way out here? At home she fed and tucked Christina in and went out into the yard. It had been over 2 weeks since Robert had left. They'd called yesterday, and he'd said he'd be here today or tomorrow. Cindy couldn't make sense of herself. Was she happy? Yes, very. But what lay ahead? That she didn't know. Living and lying to Robert? He had said last time that as soon as Christina could be moved, they would get married right away. She would finally be his wife. Cindy decided to weed with the flowers, the only decoration in the yard. The door to the house was open, so if Christina woke up, she would hear right away. "Hello, Cindy." She flinched and turned around. Liam was standing in the yard. "What are you doing here? What do you want? How did you find me?" Liam smirked. "But it's not that hard. Let's go inside, darling. I missed you madly." Cindy stood up opposite him. "We're not going to any house. Leave me alone at last. Your debt is paid. What do you want from me anyway?" Liam grabbed her arm and dragged her into the house. Cindy tried to break free, but remained silent, afraid of scaring her daughter. Liam threw her on the couch, sat down himself across from her. "I have debts to pay, but I have debts to pay, and you can help me pay them off. You're crazy. I'll go to the police, though. Then I guess your Robert will find out about everything. You know Michael has lots of pictures of you and testimonials from satisfied customers too. Liam, leave me alone. What makes you think I have to pay your debts at all?" Liam laughed, stood up and headed towards the crib. Cindy quickly tore off the couch and stood between him and the crib. "I don't have any money. I'm telling you the truth." "You don't, but yours, Robert, very much does. It's not mine." "Cindy," Liam sighed. "You see, you're my last hope. I won't give up. I have nothing to lose, and if I don't have the money in a week, I'll tell your Robert everything." "Don't wait a week. I'm listening to you." They turned around and Robert was standing on the doorstep. He motioned to Liam. He tried to jump out the door, but he didn't have time. Robert caught him and punched him in the face. "What are you doing here? And why does Cindy have to give you the money?" Liam tried to get away again, but immediately received another blow. "Your Cindy is a call girl. She's been a call girl for a long time." "Oh, you bastard." Robert punched Liam again, and Cindy quietly settled down on the couch. That was it. The phantom happiness was over before it had even begun. Tears streamed from her eyes. 10 minutes later, a car roared to life. Apparently Liam had left. Robert came back, sat down on a chair, and approached her. "Is it true?" "Robert, I've been meaning to tell you everything, but I kept being afraid you wouldn't want to." "You're right, I won't." "You're crap. You're such an asshole. Am I gonna take my daughter away from you? Or maybe my daughter isn't mine either? And you just don't know who her daddy is." Cindy stood up, proudly raising her head. "You'd better think she's not yours. It'll be easier on everyone." Robert stood up, gave her a long look, and walked out of the house, and Cindy collapsed on the couch and sobbed. It was 200 hours later when she went outside. There were big bags on the porch, diapers, clothes, cereal. She cried again. God, why is she like this? A few months passed. In the evening, Cindy was counting the money she had. The money that Robert had once given her had recently run out. She had been very frugal. She had bought nothing for herself, only the cheapest food. Now she would have to make do with her allowance, which she had been saving. The woman put the money aside. A month ago, she had to buy a car of firewood. It hit her budget very hard, but she has a child in the house and no option to heat economically. For 3 months, she will definitely have enough. But then what? She didn't know yet. There was a knock at the door. Cindy flinched. It was evening outside, raining. Who could it have brought to her? Cindy looked out the window. She couldn't see anything. Everything was flooded. The windows were fogged up. She felt creepy for some reason. She went to the door. Who's there? Cindy, open up. It's Charles. The woman quickly unhooked the door and threw herself on the neck of her past savior. Where did you come from? How? I'm here to meet my granddaughter. I barely got the address from Robert. What happened? Cindy sighed. What was bound to happen someday? Robert found out about everything. Well, what did he find out? Did you tell him what happened? No, I didn't have time. He's gone. Who cares what happened? It happened. So you're okay with it? Of course. I won't even try. I'll raise my daughter. She'll grow up a little. We'll move to the city. I'll put her in a kindergarten, and I'll get a job myself. The man looked at her carefully, then shook his head. Show me your granddaughter. Charles insisted that she go to the city with him. If you don't want to live in our house, I'll buy you an apartment. Why are you sitting here alone? A child should grow up in civilization. But Robert's not here. He's gone to his home country. Angry as hell. He doesn't talk to anyone and hardly calls me. But why do I bring everyone nothing but misery? Come on, don't beat yourself up. It's just the way life is, and there's nothing we can do about it. 3 days later they left. Charles, as promised, bought her a 2-room apartment nearby, and he visited her often. Christina loved her grandfather. Cindy was finally able to finish her studies and even get a job. The daughter was 4 years old when Charles caught a cold. At first, it was just a cold, to which he paid no attention, and as it turned out, for nothing. The illness progressed, and within a week he was sick. Cindy and Christina moved in with him. Cindy had to take a vacation because he didn't want anyone else in the house. Charles, we have to eat. Cindy, but I don't want to really. Tell me, did Robert show up? No, of course not. What do you think? Cindy looked at him in surprise. What do I think? I don't understand you. Cindy, I'll be gone, and you'll be alone in the world again. Hasn't there been a good man by your side all this time? Cindy smiled. No, I haven't. I don't understand. Have you decided to marry me off? I have, and as soon as possible. I don't think I'm going to make it this time. What are you talking about? Don't you dare even think of such a thing. By evening, Charles was worse, and the doctor insisted on hospitalization. Cindy went with him, and with Christina remained faithful Sebastian, with whom the girl was also very friendly. Cindy sat in the corridor while the doctor examined Charles, then he came out to her. Why didn't you come sooner? The doctor was about 40, a very handsome man with a calm look. You don't know how hard it was to get Charles to go to the hospital. He wouldn't go now. He was just so sick he couldn't argue. My name is Jacob. Seeing the mute question in Cindy's eyes, he smiled. Just Jacob for you. Unfortunately, people like that are not uncommon. They're afraid to cause a lot of trouble, but they cause even more. Excuse me, can I buy you a coffee and we can talk? Yes, of course, I'd appreciate it. They were in the doctor's office. He made coffee, put the cup in front of Cindy. What can I say? Of course it's very bad, considering that Charles has had many operations in his life, and his body is very worn out. It's nothing critical. I mean, we'll fight. We'll get it out, but there may be complications, but it's too early to tell. Thank you. I'm very worried. This man is very important to us. To us? Are you married? The doctor seemed upset, but Cindy smiled. No, we are me and my daughter. You have a daughter? Yes, Christina. She's about to be 5. She's probably as beautiful as you are, isn't she? Cindy was embarrassed. Not at all, much better than me. Jacob laughed. You're a real mother. Only with real mothers, their child is unequivocally better. They talked for another half hour. Cindy was so at ease, and Jacob suddenly said, Cindy, I don't even know how to say this properly. In general, I would like to invite you, for example, to a restaurant or maybe somewhere where your girl would be interested too." She smiled. A nice man, of course, older than she was, but that was such a small thing. Maybe Charles is right. Stop waiting for Robert, who doesn't care about them. I'll think about it, only if later, when Charles is feeling better. No problem, I'll wait. Besides, I have an incentive now to get him back on his feet as soon as possible. They said goodbye warmly. Tell me, what time can I come tomorrow? Right after lunch, with a lot of tests and procedures before lunch. Okay, thank you very much. She left and Jacob stood pensive for a long time. The family must be very wealthy. I wonder who she is to this Charles. A daughter? Doesn't seem like it, but they must have something in common, so it makes sense. The thing is, Jacob always wanted the good life. He was a good doctor, though, and he loved his job. He didn't want to lead anyone astray. He just thought that if he was to connect his life with someone, it should be with someone who would be of some use besides love. Cindy seemed to be just the person he needed. He would have to get her interested, but in the meantime he would treat the man she had come with. After a few days, Charles got better, so much so that he asked Cindy to bring him some cutlets. Cindy looked at him in surprise. Cutlets? That's right. I don't know why I wanted cutlets so badly. Jacob, who was also in the room, laughed. Well, now I see it's on the mend. So, Cindy, you must keep your promise. He left the room and Charles looked at Cindy. What promise, if it's no secret? Cindy waved it away. Jacob asked me to go to a restaurant, and I said I'd think about it when you were better. Charles hesitated. Why, that wouldn't be such a bad idea. There was something about the doctor he didn't like, and he couldn't say what it was, but he was a grown man, an established man, not a bad match for Cindy. But there was an unpleasant feeling in his soul. And Cindy and Jacob were really developing a romance. Cindy couldn't say she liked the doctor very much as a man, but he wasn't disgusting either. He was smart, very versatile, and he was good with Christina. Charles had already checked out when Cindy came to see him. She and Jacob had been dating for a month and a half, and today he proposed to her. Cindy was confused. She didn't think it would be that quick. Charles immediately saw that Cindy was worried about something. Cindy, what's wrong and why are you alone? I came to talk. Jacob proposed to me. Charles felt a twinge in his heart. I said I'd think about it. A month and a half is not a long time. Cindy, how do you feel about him? How do you feel about him? I don't know. He doesn't disgust me, he's interesting. Cindy grinned. Of course it's nothing like it is with Robert. Charles looked at her carefully. Are you still in love with Robert? She looked at him in surprise. Why is it possible to fall out of love with someone? There was silence for a few minutes. Then Charles said, Yes, Cindy, you have to weigh everything. Loving one person and living with another is very hard. She left and Charles picked up the phone. He didn't want to interfere in the relationship between Robert and Cindy, especially since the latter didn't want to hear anything about her. But now he decided that he would try. Robert hung up the phone. He had immediately interrupted his father when he talked about Cindy, but the fact that she had been proposed to and would probably accept it left a residue on his soul. He took the picture from the table, and no one here knew anything about her. So the little portrait of Cindy always stood on his desk, and also Christina's. His father, though Robert had never asked for it, sent pictures of her from time to time. Robert knew Dad had bought her an apartment, knew he was helping his granddaughter, so he sent him money. He didn't say it was for Christina, but Charles understood it all himself. The older Christina got, the more she looked like Robert. He saw it perfectly well. He looked at her pictures for a long time, but he couldn't help it. There was a very strong resentment against his father. Why hadn't he told him right away? Shit. He got up from the table and walked over to the window. He stared out at the street for a while, then pulled out his cell phone. Dad, can you tell me how and what? Why did Cindy do it? Of course I'll tell you everything. I should have done it a long time ago, but you didn't want to hear it. They talked for over an hour. When Robert hung up the phone, he felt worse. Shit, so what? Did it get better? No, definitely not, because he now realized that he behaved, to put it mildly, in a bad way. Cindy, it was her fault too. She should have told him everything at once too. Would he have been with her then? Probably not. But then there wouldn't have been all this. There wouldn't have been Christina. There wouldn't have been those very happy days. All in all, Robert was completely confused, so he knew he had to go home, look Cindy in the eye, and then decide what to do. Some nasty inner voice squeaked. Who needs you after all these years? Cindy's doing the right thing. She would get married and live a normal life, not wait for the weather. Robert tried to muffle that voice, opened the door, asked the secretary to come in. Emma, I have to go to America. Any questions are for the deputy. I'm to be called as a last resort. Okay, I'm sorry. Is there a problem with your father? No, he's fine. Thank you. He noticed a shadow on the secretary's face, and suddenly he remembered that this nice woman had been very concerned about his father's health when he was here for surgery, had even visited him in the hospital a few times, and then they had left. Robert vividly remembered how glum his father had been the day he'd left, but Robert had attributed his mood to the fact that Sebastian had reported Cindy's disappearance. What if that wasn't the case at all? Could it be that father and Emma? Damn, but why can't he ever see beyond his own nose? Cindy and Jacob sat in the cafe. She has to give an answer tonight. Cindy has been up all night, she kept thinking. Jacob is good, reliable. What more could a woman want? Everything seems fine, but Jacob, I realize you're waiting for an answer. Cindy, why don't we have dinner first? She smiled. Christina was at Charles, and it was safe to rest. Cindy knew that Charles would tuck the girl in, read her a story, and they would probably watch cartoons on TV while her mom was away. Cindy forbade watching cartoons before bedtime, but the grandfather spoiled his granddaughter. They ate dinner, and Cindy realized the hour had come. Jacob, I'm going to be honest with you. I've given your proposal a lot of thought, and I can tell you now, I couldn't marry you. I have been in love with another man for many years, and I would hate to lie to you. Jacob sighed. You know, I expected that answer. It was clear to me that when we're together, you're not really with me, so you're not resentful. Cindy was glad. She didn't want to offend Jacob. I'm offended, but not offended enough not to suggest that you stay friends. While the flight lasted, Robert thought about his life. At the time when he met Cindy, he had a girlfriend, and admittedly, he was even going to get married, but not until he met Cindy. It was only then that he realized what true love meant. The parting was hard. The girl was the daughter of his boss. What does he have in the end? Nothing. After he left Cindy, he couldn't think of any other relationship. He'd had women, of course, but they were just for one day. He took a cab and went home. He wondered if Cindy was at her father's, how would their meeting happen? There was no Cindy, but there was his father who said glumly, "You must be late. They're at the restaurant, and Cindy will give him an answer tonight." How? Right. What did you want? He's a decent man, not the wind in the field like some people. Daddy? Daddy what? Cindy should have gotten married a long time ago, and she's been waiting for you, you fool. What restaurant are they at? The Wave, I think. Where are you going? I'm going that way. I won't let her say yes. Cindy and Jacob went outside. Do you need a ride? No, I don't need a ride. I'll walk. Cindy, it's late, but the weather's nice. Cindy. A shout literally tore through the evening air. They turned and saw Robert running towards them. Cindy felt her legs go cotton. Jacob looked at her pale face in surprise. Is that him? Yes. Robert ran up angrily, looked at Jacob, then shifted his gaze to Cindy. Cindy, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm an idiot. I'll be sure to beg your forgiveness. But now you must tell this man that you will not marry him, because otherwise I will not vouch for myself. Jacob's eyebrows flew upward, but he found the strength to laugh. Calm down, young man. Cindy has already turned me down, apparently because of you. 2 months later, Robert finally moved back home. He was going to start his own business, but now he had other things to worry about. Dad, are you okay? Charles laughed. I'm fine. You look like an opera singer. Dad, it's not funny. I don't know why Cindy likes tuxedos so much. Why don't you change? Charles waved me off. I've got time. It's 2 hours till the signing. I'd hurry up if I were you. We're going to have a guest any minute. A man has kindly agreed to fly to our wedding, or rather, a guest. What's it got to do with me? They're your guests. Not exactly. My assistant Emma's coming to my wedding. Remember her? Was it his imagination, or did his father turn pale? The doorbell rang and Charles almost ran into the room. Appeared in front of Robert and Emma 20 minutes later in full parade. The wedding ceremony was being held in the best restaurant in town. When Robert saw Cindy walking toward him and leading the little princess by the hand, his breath caught. How good his girls are! They are the most beautiful. How happy is he that Cindy has found the strength to forgive him. And Christina is the most wonderful child in the world. They walked over. Robert kissed his bride tenderly, and Christina was picked up in his arms. Cindy looked around as if searching for someone. Robert, where's Charles? If he's not here, there's no ceremony. You know what he means to us. He knew. Gently he turned Cindy around and pointed somewhere. There in a corner sat Charles and Emma. They were chatting, and Emma's hands were resting in Charles. It seemed like they were alone here, and there wasn't a crowd of dressed-up guests. Cindy smiled. Isn't that Emma by any chance? Emma, how do you know? He called out for her when he was delirious with fever, but he wouldn't tell me who it was. Charles and Emma even had to be called so the ceremony could begin. It's been a year. Cindy, you coming soon? Yes, Robert. The trial's over. I'll be there soon. How did it go? It was great. Michael and Liam got a good settlement. I'll tell you all about it when I get there. By the way, I have more news for you. Robert smiled. Cindy spent a year trying to find the girls who had worked for Michael out of choice. There were a lot of girls. Liam often figured in their path too. By all means, she decided to punish them. Robert helped in any way he could. Today was the last trial. He lit the candles on the table, looked around the room. By the glass in the hall stood a small box, and in it, of marvelous beauty, a bracelet. Cindy was preparing a surprise for him. Only he already knew what that surprise was and had thoroughly prepared for it. This morning, he happened to see the test in the bathroom, and it had a clear 2 stripes on it. The door slammed open and Cindy appeared on the kitchen doorstep. She gave the table a surprised look, then looked at Robert. Are we having some kind of celebration? She looked at her husband suspiciously, trying to remember what she might have forgotten. "Of course, I hope you'll give me a son this time." Cindy sighed frustratedly. "You know everything, don't you?" He picked her up in his arms, and I know everything, everything, everything. And I also know that I love you very much, more than life. The woman laughed, hugged her husband. "You don't know everything." Robert looked at her anxiously. "Tell me? We're going to have twins." He gently set Cindy on the floor and exhaled completely dumbfounded. "Really?" "That's it." Cindy laughed and hugged her husband gently.